When emergency first responders were overwhelmed by Los Angeles County's most destructive fire yet, a band of surfers, along with their neighbors and friends, stepped up to defend their home turf in Malibu. Their devotion to home drove them to show up for their community during the fire and for years afterward. And now, a model they call the Community Brigade program could change everything, leading to more lives and more homes saved during the increasing wildfires across not just California, but the world. Join reporter Adriana Cargill from KCRW, NPR's All Things Considered, Crooked Media, and more, as she investigates a wildfire story that is not depressing, but is, in fact, a clear hope for the future. Listen now to Sandcastles, an award-winning podcast about home, how we create it, and why we fight so hard for it. Welcome to Important Not Important. My name is Quinn Emmett.
And I'm Brian Colbert Kennedy.
This is the podcast where we give you the tools you need to fight for a better future for everyone. And we are doing that today for sure. We're giving you the context straight from the smartest people on earth out there working on the front lines and the action steps you can take to support them.
That's right. Our guests are scientists, they're doctors and nurses, journalists, engineers, farmers, politicians, activists, educators, business leaders, astronauts, even a reverend.
And despite your Wi-Fi going in and out, hopefully people heard that list. This is your friendly reminder that you can send questions, thoughts, and feedback to us on Twitter at ImportantNotImp, or you can email us at funtalk@importantnotimportant.com.
And despite your Wi-Fi going out, I hope people could hear that. You can also join tens of thousands of other smart people and subscribe to our free weekly newsletter at importantnotimportant.com.
That's right. Brian, this week's episode is getting into how do we orchestrate a just energy transition for frontline, low and middle income communities and cities, and most importantly, doing that from the inside out.
And who's here to tell us and teach us? Well, our guest, Daphany Rose Sanchez.
Daphny.
And boy, does she have a story to tell. We feel very lucky that she shared it with us and all of the ways that we can help out. Stay tuned, because this is a good one, and find out why a just transition is the only way forward and what you can do to make it happen in your city.
Absolutely. All right, let's go talk to Daphny.
Let's go.
Our guest today is Daphany Rose Sanchez, I think. And together, we are putting the people first and finding out how to transition frontline, low and middle income residents to a clean energy future. Daphny, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we think it's you. 10 seconds ago, I asked you if you could pronounce your name because I am terrible with names. And you said, I think my name is Daphany Rose Sanchez. And I said, stop. What is happening?
Oh, my parents are Brooklyn natives, and so there's like a lot of Spanglish in our vocabulary. And so my father's name is Daniel and my mother's name is Darlene, and they're like, oh, we like the name Stephanie, so let's merge it into two and just keep the DA. So my dad introduces me as Daphany Rose Sanchez, and my mom introduces me as Daphny Rose Sanchez. So all my life, people are like, am I pronouncing your name right? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, I honestly have no idea.
Fuck it. Who cares? Wait, do you gravitate towards one of them, or have you, like, was there a teenage period where you embraced one? I'm fascinated by this.
As long as it sounds similar to any of those two, I'm okay with it. Because I've had people just like give up and call me Stephanie, and I'm like, no, that's not my name.
No.
it's Daphne, I'm fine with. Daphne, like Daphany is fine, but don't call me Stephanie because it's not my name.
Right. Can't just call me Jeff. Like, that's not what my name is.
No, not nice.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for that backstory. That's really helpful. Now I just want to hang out with your parents.
They
sound pretty great.
Cool cats.
Cool. All right. Well, we figured out your name. That's so wonderful. And then now, Daph. Can I call you Daph?
You can call me Daph. That's fine.
Can you? I just want to add. I want to add more options into the mix.
Daphne is fine. If you stray away from the D, then that's when you're you're off.
Sure.
Right. Daphany, can you tell our listeners, please, briefly, just like who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Daphany Rose Sanchez. I'm a born and raised Brooklynite. I am actually a fourth generation Brooklynite. So I bleed Brooklyn till I die.
Yes.
The work that I do is really focused on energy equity and affordability. I have been working in this space for about 12 years now, really understanding how can we help our communities get to a climate justice transition. A lot of times you've heard people talking about like, we need to do X, Y, and Z to get to goal. And what my company, Kinetic Communities, does is say, hold on, we don't want to do that. Let's make sure we're incorporating Black and Brown communities into the solution and right the wrongs that has been done time and time again. And one of the things that we always say is like, we love this planet, but this planet has done, like people in this planet have done detrimental things to Black and Brown communities. And if getting to net zero by 2050 means that we have to once again let Black and Brown communities down, then honestly, let's let the planet go to shit, because it's not worth living in a planet where people aren't cared for. So we really work with government and utility and helping them thinking about, okay, you want to install solar in the community. How does that look like? Okay, you want to install air source heat pumps, instead of bringing outside contractors, who are the contractors, the mom and pop shops that have already been helping that community? And how do we make sure that they have the appropriate resources to transform and keep up with the new technology evolution? I'm very proud of what I do. It's pretty unique because we're looking at it really from that just transition lens. And like, I care about energy. I know the engineering. I know the policies behind it. But more importantly, like, I don't want to see my community holding the problem for everyone else just to get us to net zero. And so that's a little bit of what I do. I focus on New York only. I think I said it in the beginning, and I want to emphasize like
Something
my solutions are New York.
Brooklyn for life, I believe.
Blood.
Yeah.
Brooklyn for life. Right.
Brooklyn for life. Brooklyn till I die. So, but I actually work throughout the 5 boroughs,
Awesome.
because that's where all New Yorkers are.
Rock and
That's
roll.
so great. So great. Lift up the community. Like, how can you be doing anything better than that? Incredible.
See, Brian?
I'm working on it. Awesome. Daphny, thank you. We're gonna keep going here. Quinn is gonna provide some quick context for our little topic today, and then we'll get into some action-oriented questions and actions that everybody out there can do to support you and be just more aware of what's going on and what needs to be done. Sound good?
Sounds good. Sounds like a game plan.
Daphny, we like to start with one important question, though, to set the tone for these shenanigans. Instead of saying, tell us your entire life story, we like to ask, and we've adjusted this a little bit recently, Daphny, why are you vital to the survival of the planet as we know it? I encourage you to be bold and honest.
So the 2 other podcasts that I've heard, I heard this question, and I sat there.
And then she stopped listening.
And then I stopped listening because I was like, what is this? Like, this is ridiculous. No. Because it's just like, what does this even mean? I think, and I've been joking around with every single person I've met, by the way, with this question. I'm like, so what do you guys think? No, but I think that on the macro scale, there are leaders that I admire that are really pushing the envelope and globally thinking about how do we address climate change. On the micro level, I feel like my experience being, third generation public housing resident, being from like a low income community, and really ensuring that climate action and program design is being inclusive is the way that I am supporting our world moving forward. And a lot of people find me to be very aggressive and like a little bit too forward. And I'm like, yeah, well, at least, if I'm being aggressive with you today and saying like, you need to incorporate minority contractors in your programming, or you need to ensure low income communities have access to solar without putting a financial burden to them, then you might be resistant to me saying that. But the next person that comes down the line and they say the same thing, you'll be more amenable to doing that because you've already like faced that. And so I feel like I've been in a position where like my firm and the work that I do is really challenging kind of the norms and energy efficiency of how people operate and saying, all right, this is trash. Like you need to do this better. You need to be mindful of the structural racist practices that's happened in the past and you need to make it right. So I think that's what I'm contributing. I'm giving people that kind of chance to feel uncomfortable. And they might not act on it right away, but you know, the next generation or other individuals that might elevate and emphasize on that same topic will do the work because they'll be like, oh, right. That's what Daphne said. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I said to you like 5 months ago.
I love it.
So yeah.
I love it. I think that's great. Give them the radical candor. Let's do this thing. Clock is ticking. That's awesome. Thank you for thank you for researching this topic since you listened to 20 minutes of our podcast. I appreciate all the thought and energy you've put into this.
40 minutes total to 20 episodes of 2 minutes.
Technically, I was going to say technically 40 minutes. Because I was like, I listened to one and then I listened to the other and I was like, okay, once it gets to this question, I'm like, this is like the 20-minute mark already. Right. I'm like, okay.
It's good that twice, just to be sure, check the list. Twice you were just like, I've made an enormous mistake. Like, how can I get out of this? Please, hurricane, come and turn off my power.
No. Not absolutely not that. I don't know if you guys know, but actually, like as I was mentioning before, I have a tremendous respect for hurricane. So not only have I like lived through like 3 generations of public housing, but my parents were the first ones to move out of public housing, buy a house in Staten Island. And then within less than a year, we lost the house. And we were in the house when Hurricane Sandy happened. So I was doing my final presentation for undergrad and I was like in the Zoom doing my work and my mother comes in and she's like, Daphne, I think you left the toilet running. And I'm like, Mom, I don't leave the toilet running. Like, I know I'm not supposed to do that. And out of nowhere, she's like, oh no, Daphne, like, that's not the toilet. That's flood water. And I start cracking up because I was like, oh my God, like you're being paranoid. This is again, being the typical New York. I'm like, this is New York. Nothing like that ever happens here. Like that's only like those post-apocalyptic movies where floods happen. And I kid you not, it was 6:30 p.m. The moment I started laughing and I closed my door, I get back on my bed. I open the shades of my window and it's just brown water, like all the way to the top of the window. And I remember at that moment thinking, what is going on? My dad is like, oh my God, Daphne, get the dog. And my mom comes and I just stood there looking at the window, like it was like a foot away from me. She yanks me out of the room. And the moment she yanks me out of the room, my floorboards burst and my window burst with water just rushing in. And and what I was telling her, I was like, oh my God, my final thesis is underwater. And she's like, Daphne, stop, like go upstairs right now. You know, like this is not a game. And I'm like, no, I need to get my pay. Like, no, I worked so hard for this. I start catching a million panic. It's like a worst case scenario. I start catching a bunch of panic attacks. My dad is diabetic. My mom is epileptic and she's trying to keep my father and I down because my father's Puerto Rican. And so again, born and raised in Brooklyn. He was raised in Marcy and then in Cooper. And I was raised in Marcy and Cooper. So we've never really experienced something like this where she was born and raised in Brooklyn, but she spent some time in Costa Rica and she's seen flash floods. So she immediately knew what was going on. And she like took fajas. She took ropes and then she like put it around us. And she's like, okay, this is how we're going to stay together. We're going to stay on the roof. We're going to, call 911 and we're just going to have to ride this out. When literally there was like around the entire house was surrounded in water. And it wasn't like till 1 o'clock in the morning, we got rescued by boat. And I remember when we got rescued by boat, I'm having a panic attack and the firefighter was like, to my mother, like, how old is your daughter? She's like, she's old enough to not be acting like this. And I was like, no, we're on this boat. Like, this is a part in the movies where people get rescued and the second tide comes and then you got to swim back to the house because the boat turns over.
Oh my God.
I cannot imagine.
Yeah. So I feel, and then they left us like a mile away from the house. That like it was a mile away, and the evacuation, like where you're supposed to evacuate, was also flooded, and it just looked like complete like end of world. And I was just so jarred about it because I was studying sustainability and like in this work, and really looking at it exclusively as like, oh, I care about housing, right? And I want to make housing a better for Black and Brown communities. But at that specific moment, with all this knowledge on climate change and sustainability, I couldn't do anything. Like I was just there saying, we're going to die. And my mother was the one that was like, no, let's do this. Let's get here. Let's do that. And I'm forever grateful for that. So that's why I say I also have a lot of respect for hurricanes and kind of that perspective of this is some real shit that's happening today. We talk about climate solutions as it's some future, but every single day people are going through climate disasters. And of course, it's Black and Brown communities that are experiencing it first.
Of course.
We're talking about, energy efficiency and solutions. We have to think about what are we doing today to make sure that these communities don't have to go through what I had to go through. And that's what makes me like super aggressive with people being like, I literally give zero fudges about what you
clear,
think.
You can swear
definitively, unless it's going to make the chanting happen faster, you can definitely start dropping F-bombs here.
Yeah, no problem.
It is appropriate. Well, we appreciate, first of all, that's a horror show, and I'm sorry you had to live through one of those movies. That's just truly wild. But I'm glad that everybody is okay. And yes, it is, if you are swimming in the ocean, in a wildfire, going through a hurricane, watching a tornado, any of these things, you just realize nature is just so much bigger and more powerful than we are.
Yeah.
There's no version of fighting it. So, but there are things we can do and focus on things we can control. And that's what I want to do today. Because as you alluded to, and we allude to basically every show, we can all agree that the status quo, I mean, pick your subject, your topic is unjust to so many. And so we have to design a near future and a long-term future and a transition into those futures that are vastly more just, and to most practically and fairly do so to those that have been left behind, often on purpose, or they've been redlined, whatever it might be. Those people, not only we can't just design for them, but they have to be a part of that conversation. They have to be, to use the ridiculous quote these days, they have to be in the room where it happens, right? And so much of our future is cloudy, figuratively and literally. So we have to operate from the facts on the ground. We have to extrapolate what we can for the near term and provide both a safety net for now and the near future, because that doesn't exist, but also reach for something that's so much better and higher and more equitable. And again, like you mentioned, and is the idea today is, just as frontline communities have to be first in line when designing disaster preparedness efforts or adaptation and mitigation efforts, it's imperative that they're not only protected from the negative, but benefit first from the enormous opportunities before us for so many reasons. Clean energy, cleaner air, cleaner, more affordable water, better jobs, participating in these new circular personal and community economies where the work you do improves the world around you in practical, measurable ways, reducing waste, not only in food and water and power and land, but in human potential. And so much of that has been wasted. And again, a lot of it on purpose because of things like white supremacy. So let's talk today about transitioning frontline and low-income communities to this more just energy future. And Daphny, I know you've made it a point to teach people that as part of this, that community is everything. And as much as we're all very much apart in these weird ways right now, community has also meant more than ever during COVID. So you've made it very clear you're fourth generation Brooklyn. You're working in the same community you grew up in. You guys moved out for a minute before the floods came. So you're working for these same families and so many others who need and deserve quality, affordable housing, and then everything we can bring to that. Just to focus on you for a second, why do you feel uniquely suited to do this job? Is there a specific relationship you can point to that got you here? Was there a specific moment besides the floods towering over your windows? Like, why you for this?
I mean, for me, I feel like there are not a lot of individuals in the sector that really understands the intersectionality, right? Growing up in public housing, there is this stereotype that you should be embarrassed of growing up in this neighborhood, that you should feel ashamed of government subsidies. And you are kind of this concept of being quarantined, right? We're going through a quarantine through coronavirus. But this concept of quarantine is not new for folks that live in public housing. We're always seen as like a subpar human species just because of where we live. And I think that experience that I've had growing up in public housing and then experiencing Sandy, that kind of combination really allows me to think about unique policy recommendations, unique program developments, and unique implementation design that can be influential in my community and really showing our communities like enough is enough. Like these stereotypes exist and they're not true. How do we start working for ourselves to build our intergenerational wealth? Because we really can't wait for, a knight in shining armor to come down and be like, oh, well, now we want to do solar for you. Like, aren't you happy?
Right.
It's like, no, I'm not.
Right.
Like, you've already taken our land and you want to continue kind of perpetuating these issues. So that's why for me, like my voice and the work that I do is, I believe is very unique. And I look for the day to meet someone else that's had the same experience in me, that is doing the same work that I'm doing, because it's hard. I work in this intersection of housing and energy and really making it focused, honed in on the community. Whereas I think that the sector as a whole, like I see buildings as, this is so wonky to people. Like I see buildings as like a living ecosystem, right? They have community members that are breathing in these buildings, that have created a culture around these buildings. And I love that culture. And I feel like in order for us to get to this climate transition, I need to show everyone like there's beauty inside of these cultures that you consider low income, that you consider so subpar. And we need to elevate our communities so that they can start receiving the benefits that have been taken away from them for decades. And I just don't know anyone else that does it. But if you guys know folks, please connect me, because I'm like yearning to meet other women of color doing this work throughout the country. Well, I don't know if I'm ever answering your question, but
no, I think you did. I think it's important, but I also think it's a little like, this is just, I shouldn't even go off of this, but it's a little like the question of, are there other planets with like intelligent aliens on them, right? Which is, we're finding more and more planets and more suns and all this thing. And so if you do the math, like theoretically there should be, but at the same time, we're not hearing from anybody. And you would think with, 330 whatever million people in America, that somewhere out there would be other people, and even further, other local people, even further, other women, or women of color that are doing this job, but there haven't been many, and I think there's reasons behind that, which is it's designed against them.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
I can't imagine that your job is on Fortune magazine's like list of most lucrative jobs, right? It's like public school teachers, right? And that sucks because we need people specifically like you for of a number of reasons, doing jobs like these more than ever. Not just because like this is a job that needs to exist because of the transitions we're going to be going through, but you are qualified to do it in a number of reasons. The problem is like this next generation of people who want to make a difference either find the higher education that is probably required in some way, probably not like today because today's broken, completely affordable, or they graduate with this, back-breaking debt that's impossible to pay off in a job like yours, but a job that's improving and saving lives. Why do you feel like we make this so fucking difficult? And are there ways you can think of
racism?
Well, yes. Like people are just besides that.
I feel like people are just so, and I've had this conversation with some like corporations now ever since everything has come out the past couple of months. People are like, oh, well, like how can we support Black and brown businesses? And I'm like, well, look at your internal practices, right?
Sure.
How are you like, who are you going to hire? How are you supporting folks that have different like cultural backgrounds and socioeconomical class? How are you designing? How are you reaching out to buildings and engineering buildings? One of the things that we do is like, I went to undergrad and grad school. I went to grad school right after Sandy. And because of that, I didn't get any financial aid. It was like, oh, well, like, sorry, you missed the deadline. And I was like, yeah, sorry, I almost died. So couldn't submit an application.
Right.
But I think you're absolutely right. There are just like structural racism. And then it's also greed, right? So,
sure.
And there's this idealism of like, well, we had to struggle to like make it this far. So the next generation has to struggle as well. And it's like, why? Why are you creating these fake barriers so that so that you can feel validated when like you can't create fake barriers and then at the same time say we need a climate solution today. And a lot of companies are thinking about, they're asking for master degrees. They want, 5 to 8 years of experience and paying $40,000 a year. And when I see that, I'm like, that right there shows that like greed and like how much you can get out of someone is way more important than any climate action that you're really interested in moving forward. So we encourage folks to think about, okay, you have a job position that you want to put out there. What are the physical day-to-day steps that individual is doing? Are they coordinating meetings? Are they, looking for solutions? Are they integrating financing? Are they, creating an engineering audit and putting numbers on a spreadsheet and doing whatever? Take out all of the jargon that you might have related to energy or financing and housing. Just have the simple skill list and then put that out there with, if you want somebody that's done that for 1 year, 2 years, 0 years, because you think this is something that somebody will learn on the job, that should be the requirement. That's it. The education doesn't matter. You could have gone to a community college or the most elite college in the world. What you learn on the job is going to be so valuable. And so when you do something like that and you strongly encourage and you go out of your comfort zone and you engage with workforce development providers or nonprofits or other folks that are not in your immediate circles and saying, hey, we're looking for someone with these characteristics, these skill sets. They can be in the sector, they can, be in other sectors, and interviewing them for those raw skill sets, then you're really trying to kind of transform that market and you're really eliminating those barriers that you're creating. Well, like, no, you need to have, 4.0 GPA, Harvard graduate with 10 years of work experience for $40,000 a year.
Right. No, it's just like, no, that does.
Yeah. So we do that. Like and I'm very proud of like our first employee. She came from like the healthcare sector and her job was supporting seniors. They were coming into the hospital. They were trying to pay for services that they received at the hospital. And she would like walk them through the different insurance plans. Our job was working with affordable housing, low-income cooperatives that are like buildings that were owned by residents collectively, and they're affordable. And we work with those co-ops and like explain to them, look at their capital stacks, look at how much money they have in their reserves, help them understand like what mechanical systems need to be upgraded to more high efficiency ones, and like what are the resources out there to get the job done and do the construction management of that. And when I met her and like heard about her job, I was like, oh my God, like you're perfect for this.
Right.
It's the same exact job. The only difference is the product. And she is like phenomenal. She learned it super quickly. She was able to get that. And she was super nervous in the beginning, right? But she was like, oh my God, like the energy sector, I'm not an engineer. And I was like, engineering was not a degree until fairly recently. The way people became an engineer back in the day was that their father was an engineer. And so they learned the trade on the job. And we really need to go back to learning the trade on the job and really they call it like deindustrializing the educational system. Because once we start doing that, then we can really see more people of color, more women entering these fields when you take out these fake, barriers that people are putting. So that's kind of one example of how we can start fixing this mess in order to get closer to this climate action that we're looking for.
I love that. Yeah.
That's that's awesome. I love, Daph, that you sort of frame the transition as an opportunity, right, for affordable, quality public housing and clean power and clean energy jobs. It's holistic, and it may be a fundamental lesson for us as we seek to find transferable lessons from community to community or state to state, shoreline to shoreline. And so many different places across the world are already facing their own Sandies, right? Their own sea level rise and unaffordable housing, way more dangerous floodplains and inescapable urban heat. What have you learned in the past few years that could sort of be built into a blueprint for other communities? And also, what's unique about your home, about Brooklyn?
I would say a lot of times government are kind of rushing into these ideas of getting to net zero by 2050 because we have to do it. I think one thing that's essential, and I know a lot of folks have mentioned it, and I just have to continue emphasizing it, is how do you ensure that you are engaging the right partners to get you to that transition? Even if you feel like a partner is extremely knowledgeable and you feel comfortable, how do you get out of that comfort zone and start engaging partners that have been in those neighborhoods for 20, 30, 40 years? Because those individuals definitely have unique solutions on how to support communities' transition, because they have been supporting them with every other single thing, right? They've been supporting them seeking housing. They've supported them with food access. They've supported them with health. Energy is another thing. Like it's not, energy efficiency and climate solutions and climate resiliency is not, a foreign, unique, mystique thing. No, it's just another service that can be integrated into the everyday work. And I think that's something that's incredibly critical for cities across the country and states to think about, is like, who are you actually engaging for these conversations? And please don't engage a consultant, like engage the community, because that again defeats the purpose, and really putting your money where your mouth is, right? Like you say you care about environmental justice communities. Well, let's see how you actually do it. Are you designing these programs? Are you, putting the RFP out only, for large companies to apply for? Are you actually like making the effort to know what you don't know? And I've had conversations with folks where they're like, well, we don't feel comfortable. We don't think they have the capacity. We don't really understand, like, how can this allude to getting us to net zero? And it's like, well, you should talk to them directly. Like, of course, you're not going to understand. Like, I can't tell you what at what time my neighbor is going to start talking. Like, I should just ask her. So
what a wild idea.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny because I tell folks all the time, like the work that we do, like, I love the work that we do and the team that we put together and the partners that we have. But it all for me feels like very common sense because I grew up like my parents are like, you have a question, you ask for like you ask. Like it's not that hard, it's not that complicated. But then as you enter the workforce, this concept of like, oh, well, community engagement, people are so scared of doing it. Like they're so scared of reaching out to the community because the community, they have these these stereotypes and these misconceptions of community is going to be aggressive and mean. And it's like, well, take a step back. Do you understand why that's the kind of response and engagement you're getting? Are you just like imposing an idea? Are you just doing it in an extractive manner where you're like, we want all this information so we can create an RFP and then just shoot it off to large consultants? Because if that's the relationship you're creating, then of course people are going to be mad at you. Like you yourself as a human being wouldn't like it. So I always say like I work in the field of like just showing people what's common sense and like making them come to that realization.
But I mean, someone like you is required, like the vice president of common sense of like no shit idiot is so valuable and is one of the biggest things that's missing from virtually every American company, from like startup to massive corporation. Which is, I mean, how many times do you see an advertisement or see a product or think of someone, see something that someone said or put out a show where you go like, are you telling me that like 12 fucking people approved this and it's this still happened? And you're like, well, yeah, because it's like 12 white guys between like 38 and 62. And they're the same person. They're just printed out of a fucking machine. Like,
exactly.
Of course they did. Because there was no other, like along that list of 12 guys, there was no different, there wasn't a different perspective at anywhere along the line.
Yep.
Right. And so you're like, my job is implying common sense to people, but so many of these people, it doesn't click for them. And it's funny. I had written something down when I was doing some reading on you. And I thought I have this wonderful friend who's so smart and so such a wonder, works hard and is a wonderful voice for the struggle for writers in Los Angeles, but also for the Black community. And he has this great tweet that is like 3 years old now, maybe even older. And it's fantastic. And it just says, his name is Franklin Leonard. And it says, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression, but it's not. And it's so simple and it's so specific. And it's made me think of, there's this story in Washington Post and New York Times in the past couple of weeks, basically talking about in places where cities and towns have started to actually finally focus on their low income and or Black and brown communities with regard to urban heat or disaster planning or public transportation or food deserts or future COVID vaccine access. There's been a bit of pushback from everyone else, which is the people who are used to being taken care of first, or the people who, like you said, get the RFP and swoop in and say, let me build this shit, right? And it's not unexpected because America's a fucking racist place. Like,
and greedy, racist and greedy.
Right, and they go together so well for these 12 white guys, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we had this just tremendous conversation last year, which I can't believe it's been a year, but I mean, every day feels like a year now, with Rihanna Gunn Wright, and she's one of the architects of the Green New Deal. And she,
I know her.
she is the shit. I love her so much. But she talked with us and talks publicly all the time about how important it was objectively, but also personally, that she include things like clean energy access and clean energy jobs specifically for Black people and low-income communities in the Green New Deal. And it was because 1, it's the right thing to do. 2, because those people are out of work and need jobs. 3, we need those specific jobs. And 4, because she was like, I'm writing this for people that I know, for my family and friends back in Detroit. So on that note, a little bit as we go kind of broader, it's obviously so helpful and important when possible for people who do your particular job to work in the zip code they're familiar with, if not where they're raised, right? But how can, in sort of Rihanna's example, how can broader statewide policy or federal policy take into account most effectively localities across the country for doing things like you're doing?
Well,
let me know if any of that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would continue to say, like, they just need to talk to the people locally, like, make the effort. Like, people make effort to figure out what companies they want to work in, right? Like, you do some research on it and you figure it out and you make your introduction and you work so adamantly to go to a specific company or go to a specific educational educational university. Like, the same thing should be done to communities. Like, there's a value in engaging community organization. There's a value of engaging and like uplifting community-based urban planners and community-based consultants. Even at the federal level, there are lessons learned and best practices from different regions, whether it's rural and urban, that can be incredibly valuable when you're designing these programs. Because I think one of the things that happens, there's like a federal energy program that exists. And like in certain neighborhoods, it's great because they have like the printed out versions. But in other neighborhoods where you have a younger building property manager, you can only get the printed out. And it's like, really, why can't we do things online? I literally had to spend like 3 months waiting to get a paper copy of an application to get grant funding for a building that had a temporary boiler. It's just like, it's ridiculous. So I think that
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
There is nothing, even with paper, that should take 3 months in 2020.
No,
the math just literally doesn't add up. It's insane.
That's what I'm saying. And a lot of energy solutions and like climate solutions are really, they're either antiquated when it comes to like LMI, low income and like Black and brown people engagement, or they're done in the space where it's like exclusively designed in the idea of privatization and like making investors more money. There's no in between. And this is kind of one of my frustrations. It's like on the federal level, you need to start like, they need to get out of their comfort zone. They need to start understanding what are the inefficiencies that exist in their current systems that are intentional, and how do you start moving that forward? And just kind of giving you all another example with that same program, like the idea and the concept of we need to conserve more energy, we need to eliminate fossil fuels. But in that program, it only takes into consideration American citizens. And it's like, what does a citizenship, what is a status? You know, if you're a DACA, if you're an immigrant, like, why does that matter to your energy consumption? It makes no freaking sense. And it's incredibly infuriating when people are like designing these programs and like, we need to get to net zero. We need to, you know, support affordable housing. And they say it right in the broadest of scopes to like, like force privatization. And then it's like, okay, well, give us the money and let us work it. And then they're like, oh, no, but we need a social, we need your firstborn and give us the rest of your paychecks. Like, so that's my suggestion for local is the same for federal, is the same for state. Really, start getting uncomfortable, start connecting with folks. We have a deadline, yes, but the deadline doesn't mean shit if we're going to be in the same space we are today. I'm 100% confident we're going to get to net zero by 2050. I have no doubt in my mind that we will be fossil free. But I know, and this is my frustration, is that we've seen our economy transition time and time again. And every single time our communities are the ones to receive the short end of the stick.
Yeah, at best, they're left out. And that's not usually the way it goes. You know, the normal state of affairs is, hey, guess what? Now we've got refineries and you have to live next to those.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's a nightmare. So is there something that I thought about, and this might be me being entirely uneducated on this specific structure, which would be the seventh time today and it's noon. So I thought about, in the lack of climate action the past 4 or 5 years federally, there's been a number of ad hoc and informal and more formal organizations that have popped up to take action on more local and statewide levels, and there's associations and all this shit. And I know there's one that's like it's like the Association of Mayors for Climate Action or something like that, and it's like 100 mayors or whatever it is. And I just wonder, is there some version of folks like yourself who do jobs like yourself who could help more specifically influence things like that federal policy? To take a proactive stance of, hey, these are the things that are transferable from the communities we live and work in, that should be a part of these policies, as opposed to just, people in DC failing to do what you have just said, like they need to do, which is to come into these communities and ask questions. Because, I just want to find some way for this not, like you said, for this not to happen again, which is at best communities like yours being left out. Is there some way to structuralize that to say, like, hey, it's almost like there's more purchasing power when there's 50 of you? I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass a little bit about it, but it's more just, is there some way to shove it in their face, I guess, is what I'm going for?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before. Like, how are you supposed to know? I was using this example with a colleague earlier, right? Like, I'm not from Jersey and I don't know what time the school bus is stopping. So if I drive out at a certain time of the day, I can get caught behind the school bus, right? So what's the next best thing? The next best thing is that, I hire someone that's in Jersey that knows that school bus route. So that way that person will never get stuck behind the bus. And it's the same kind of concept with the policies and the ideas that are coming out on the federal level. Is like, take a chance, right? Because I'm calling it a chance because that's what they'll feel like it is. But take the time to like hire organizations from those local areas, even if you feel like, okay, like their solution, like a New York-based solution sounds very New York focused. But if you hire someone from Chicago as well, if you hire someone over in California, and you wind up seeing that the solutions are pretty similar, then, maybe that should be your federal, like, urban policy recommendations for energy efficiency.
Right. Start there.
Yeah. So that would be my recommendation for folks on the federal level. And you have to acknowledge your role in this. And you also have to acknowledge when it's time to give up power, which again goes back to that greed and supremacy issue that people will feel very uncomfortable, right? Because you giving up the power that you've worked so hard for and you went to school for. It's like, if you actually care about climate change, that shouldn't matter. You should be able to step aside and provide a platform to other people. But you don't. You care about yourself.
Of course. I mean, who gives up power? To be clear, like...
Not white people.
This is the story. No, this is the story since they set foot on Jamestown. They're just like, no, we got this.
Yeah.
I feel like we've in so many podcasts and topics we've covered and subjects we've talked about, that same thing comes up, is like, how does nobody think, oh, I want to help this community, maybe I should talk to the people in this community? Like, it just makes absolutely no sense, yet it seems to just constantly happen again and again and again.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like, so I call this a common sense, and I learned a lot from my predecessors.
Right.
Like,
it's just common sense, right?
Like, these are things that my mother taught me. These are other women leaders from the community has taught me. They've always been like, listen, you listen to your elders, you listen to those around you, and then you provide solutions based off of what they're asking for. You're not just gonna, like, you're definitely not gonna, if I tell my mother and my grandmother, like, this is what we're gonna do, she's going to smack me in the back of my head. And that's like, communities hear these people coming out. They're not even from the community. They're like, we're going to install battery storage for you. Aren't you happy? And it's like, they're not physically slapping you in the back of the head, but they're like just eye rolling you, being like, goodbye, get out of here with this nonsense. So doing it in a way that's non-extractive and doing it in a way that's more inclusive, I didn't come up with that. at all. People
Right.
way before me have been saying this. It's just that for some reason, like people play completely dumb and being like, well, we don't understand what the issue is, but we don't really want to give up our power or our money either. So there has to be another way. And it's like, we're going to continue this Tom and Jerry loop because you're not understanding.
Right. And it's also crazy because, and people all the time roll their eyes when I say this, which is like, look, I understand you don't want to give up power. It's a human nature thing. But also, like, if we're basing this all on data, it hasn't gone great. Shit's not great. Yep. Shit's a lot worse for communities like yours, for sure. Of course, for Indigenous and First Nations people,
yep.
for Black people, for brown. I mean, you name it. And people that look like Brian and I have been at the helm of this ship for a few hundred years. It's not great. That, like, if you're going to be this big corporation that's basing everything on data, it's like, time's up, champ. Didn't go great. Like, let's give something else a shot. So,
yep.
Daphany, New York's taken some pretty significant steps in the past couple of years toward going carbon neutral. If there is, what role, if any, have public housing advocates had in those decisions, and how can we empower other advocates and communities and citizens to take part in the future of their cities?
There are two completely different things that are happening on public housing front. And again, this is kind of the lack of conversation that happens within sectors. In the energy efficiency front, as you mentioned, there are very aggressive Climate Mobilization Act and the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act that's been passed in the city and state to support us to get to net zero by 2050. Excuse me. I had like pancakes before I had another one coming up.
Well, no. Hold on. What kind of pancakes?
I had chocolate chip pancakes.
That's the only correct answer. That's the only correct answer. People put the fruit in, and I'm a very healthy human. But if we're gonna have pancakes,
I'm not.
Like, just do it.
I need chocolate chips in there.
What are we talking about? It's Tuesday. Put your chocolate chips in. Okay, please continue. Two totally separate things happening in public housing.
Two separate things are happening.
After this, we're gonna have another podcast about pancakes only.
I'm totally down. I love pancakes. So I actually love all things sweets, but that's a separate conversation.
You are in the right space.
So, the Public Housing Authority, we're actually working with them on working like a community solar model where we're with other minority-owned contractors. We're the only team that's 100% minority and women-owned contractors. We're hiring folks from the community to support like educational and outreach efforts. And so there's a lot of projects like that happening. There is also a multi-billion-dollar deficit with public housing. And so this is the other side of it. What we're seeing is that the federal government, the federal government is really pushing to like privatization of goods. So we're seeing privatization of healthcare. We're seeing privatization of education. And now we're seeing privatization of public housing. Recently this week, it was announced that the New York City Public Housing Authority has been very happy with RAD, which is a rental assistance demonstration program, where today the way public housing is structured as Section 9 deals, which means the apartment is subsidized and will always be subsidized in perpetuity. That means that your income would go up and down, and it would go up only to like 30% of your income, but it would always stay affordable within market rates. So if you are, let's say, you're making a couple $1,000 a year, your rent can be like $100,000, $200 a month. And then if the higher income, the rent goes up. The other thing that exists is called Section 8 housing. And Section 8 housing completely eliminates the affordability of the unit into the affordability of your income. And it's attached to you. And so the concerns with Section 8 is that there are rules. If your income, things happen, right? So your income can be really high one year and then it can go really low the following year. And so if Section 8, if your income goes really high one year, and really high is like $50,000 a year, which is a lot less than living wage in New York City, then that's it. It cancels out the affordability of your apartment, and you're paying market rate rents. What is very kind of depressing and infuriating at the same time is that throughout the history in the past 10 years of New York City, people that had Section 8 vouchers were, kicked out of the program. Landlords would try to kind of push them to not recertify, and there's not any more vouchers coming out at the federal level. So the federal government is like, oh, public housing has a big deficit, it needs money. Let's make it private so that we can get private investors to invest in fixing the buildings. But what will happen is that the buildings will go from Section 9, which is affordable housing units, to Section 8, which is income-based affordability. And so now we're seeing this intersectionality of we have these climate, and this is like my frustration, right? Like we have climate projects that are happening, and it's great because it's supporting the community and it's really creating a healthier living environment. And at the same time, like, is that community even going to be there in the next 10 to 20 years with Section 8 vouchers and a private ownership structure that will own these housing that was built on Black and brown land, which is a whole nother thing. It's like, great. Mm-hmm. So we took this land away from Black and brown people, right? They own the houses. Robert Moses was like, I want highways. So fuck your housing. We're going to put you temporarily into this public housing that we will maintain. And it was never maintained. And now, 2020, federal government is coming back again and being like, well, we're kind of over you all. We didn't give you any, like we had you living in really bad conditions, and it doesn't matter because we're going to get private investment to come save the day, and we'll give you a little voucher. But then the moment that you try to support yourself and go a little, like make a little bit more money, you're just going to have to pay market rate, and you really can't afford to live in New York. But that's not our problem. So one of the things that and there's nobody doing this right now, but I've been like, this is just me purely on Twitter being like, okay, federal government, like I hear what you're saying, but why can't we do community land trust? Like, why can't we engage the tenants that live in public housing, give them the appropriate tools, acquire financing so that we own the buildings and we own the land collectively? Because this land was ours and you took it away from us, and now you're giving it to someone else to reap the benefits. And that's really not okay. And we can do it in a sustainable manner where we're incorporating solar, we can incorporate storage, we can, insulate the buildings really tight so it can get as close to passive house as possible. But again, what's the value here, right? The value is more to the private investment and the developers, and they really want to give them kind of that carrot than like the community members, because they don't value them and they don't see them as anything else. And so my thing for public housing, as New York is going through this, other states are going through this privatization, is really community members and organizations out there really try to think about ways that we can continue to have public housing affordable in perpetuity for Black and brown communities that are sustainable. I don't want to live in an environment, in a world where we've created utopia, fossil-free future, and then Black and brown communities are living somewhere else because the housing that they had, they don't have it anymore.
Right. Because we took that too. Sorry.
You're right. It's like, Jesus. Like, it's the last place we're in New York. Now you want to take that too?
Yep. That's what we do.
This is sounds like the perfect time to get into how to help preventing that. Which is, our main goal of this whole podcast is to talk about something very important that needs help, and then get to the steps, get to the things that we can do to support. Action steps, we like to call them. So let's get into that, and I'll start with what we can do, our listeners can do with their voice. What Daphny are the big, specific, and actionable questions that all of us should be asking of our representatives, our local representatives, maybe state, et cetera?
It would be every time you're talking about a sustainability or climate resiliency or any type of project related to housing, where are the community members involved? How are you paying them? Where is that money coming from? And how do you ensure that the transition is actually just and supporting what the community has been advocating for decades? That's kind of the action items that people really need to dig down to. I was talking about this public housing case. I'm like trying to like tell folks like, hey, throughout the United States, there's privatization of public housing. How do we collectively take a stand against developers and saying enough is enough? How do you empower communities? How do you organize those communities to become a collective, to have the opportunity to own the land that has been taken away from them? How do you give them resources to understand the technologies? How do you really leverage and give up your power to support a just transition for climate action? I think it really just comes down to that, really understanding kind of your role in this space, and like how do you elevate folks that you traditionally don't engage, and you might feel uncomfortable, you might not really see kind of the selling points per se, but do it anyways. The more uncomfortable you feel, the more you should continue going through that path. Because there are community leaders that are like actively trying to figure out how to support that transition as well. And once you connect with them, it can lead to a myriad of things. And so you know, for folks in New York, you can feel free to reach out to me and my team. Like I said, we're working on solar, we're working on air source heat pumps, energy efficiency. Like we're doing all of it, really supporting our communities and getting our communities a part of the development and the design. Like we're not just going and being like, so we're planning to install 30 air source heat pumps within the specific region at a different, you know, with this specific BTO. It's like, no, like, what are you doing? How can we support your work? How can we elevate your organizations and put ours in the back burners? Because we don't matter. Like in order to get to climate action, like we don't matter. So that would be my recommendation for folks. And also on your hiring practices, like do better. Stop saying you tried because you like emailed a couple of people. Like do better.
If I could reference the great Yoda of Star Wars, do or do not, there is no try.
Nice, Brian.
I figured you would like that one, Quinn.
Sure.
Daphne, what about money? What can we do with our money to help support?
Pay people. Pay people the appropriate wages. Like pay people the appropriate wages, pay people for their time, pay people for their resources. Also understanding that the intellectual property of the community, don't use it for your own extractive purposes. Pay people for, if you're working together with idea, pay people for that idea, pay people for their research, pay people for their engagement. Like just pay people.
What an idea. Wow.
I can't believe you would just assume that they wouldn't do that, Daphne.
I know, right? It's just like people automatically, like the first thing that comes out of their mouth is like, wow, I really love the work that you're doing at Kinetic Communities. Would you let me know your hourly rates that you can kind of help us brainstorm through these ideas that we have? Yeah, that's the email I get every single time.
Wow.
Yeah, I've never gotten that email, just an FYI.
Yeah, no, I think I'm getting it. I'm getting what you're saying here.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love these emails. They're like, thank you so much for your work. I really appreciate the important things that you're doing. Do you have, a couple of hours to help us think about this?
Right. Can you do free work for us? Thank you.
Thank you for telling us that we had to pay our partners. Can you spend some free hours working with us to think about
sure.
partners?
You're a low person. Can you do this for us for free?
Wow. Daphne, it's been over an hour. I'm sort of sorry that we've kept you for that long, but hopefully
she's never gone longer than 20 minutes with us, and she's regretted every one of the 42 since then.
We really appreciate you being here, though. Thank you very, very much. Before we let you go, if there's, first of all, any recommendations of any other people that you respect, admire, that inspire you, people that are changing the world like you are, please let us know. Either now or you can shoot us a message later, but we love getting great recommendations from guests.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can give you a whole slew of folks. So there are, on the housing space, there are organizations in New York City that have worked supporting Black and Brown communities achieve home ownership. And so those are the NHSs is what I'll call them. There's NHS of Staten Island, NHS of Queens. Mm-hmm. There's another organization that is very dear to my heart. They're called UHAB. They have been they have been around since white flight. If you guys don't know what that is, you should look it up.
No, we do.
Okay, good. And they basically, when white flight happened, they took Black and Brown communities that were squatting into buildings and like helped them rehabilitate the buildings and cooperatively own the buildings. And now, it's an amazing organization. And now what they're doing is supporting those buildings, fighting gentrification, and ensuring that the co-ops have the right mechanisms to continue moving forward. And then
white people are back.
Yeah, exactly.
You said it's called UHAB?
UHAB, UHAB.
UHAB. Awesome.
Thank you.
That sounds great.
Yeah. I'll type it up in the link, although nobody can see this.
It's fine. It's all audio.
UHAB. And then I also want to elevate last two, I promise. For folks that are really interested in just transition in New York City, there's a coalition called Climate Works for All. We do have a platform of what we're asking from the city. When we're asking organizations to sign on to that platform, to show solidarity with organizations that are doing housing justice, social justice, criminal justice. Like, we all collectively want to see a just transition, but we want to make sure our communities are involved. And so that's kind of the third entity. And then the last one is, being a woman of color in this industry has been incredibly difficult. You guys can't all see me, but I'm also 4'11", so I'm pretty short. So not only am I'm a very loud-spoken New York Latina woman, but I'm also pretty short, and my height has had limitations with people seeing me as a figure of authority when I'm in energy meetings. So they'll be like, "Oh, you're so cute. Are you the intern?" And I'm like,
"Oh my God.
I hate you. I actually am the executive director, and now I'm not going to do business with you." But I've had that happen a couple of times where I go on job sites and they're like, "Oh, are you the new intern?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't even look that young." So,
what is wrong with people?
Yeah, I've had that, and people think it's okay. Oh, I can go into a whole nother hour of things that people have told me, and they feel very comfortable telling me. And then I just sit there being like, what goes through your mind that you feel so comfortable to say something incredibly racist and sexist to me? But anyway, so the last organization that I wanted to elevate is from two of my colleagues who also were feeling the same way. We actually had an event this Friday where there are women of color that are just fed up with the industry. And so they created something called Women of Color Collective of Sustainability, also known as WOKESIS. And we actually had an event this past Friday where we had 432 other women of color across the country join, the first time ever.
Nice.
And people were just so happy because it was just such a sense of, oh my gosh, we're not alone. We're all together doing this. And we're here to F stuff up.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So,
you keep holding back that F-bomb.
I know. You know what it is? I know. It's just because I have to, I curse so much in my regular life. So every time I'm work mode, I'm like, okay, try to minimize the amount of times you're cursing to 5 times an hour.
The feedback we get from people that are like, listen, this was really great. However, I was driving with my children when you went on your tirade. I'm like, look, things are dark.
Yeah.
What do you want from me?
I try my best exactly for that reason. I've been told that I go on, I'll start ranting to people and being like, what's wrong with you? This makes no sense. I said, I really have no fear, because if I love the work that I do. My company has been working aggressively in this affordable and energy efficiency space. But I've been broke before. So I can lose every single thing. And I'm like, okay, great. Back to the drawing board.
Sure,
so I have no fear in my heart when I say things. But I've also heard people being like, I have my kid here. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm so sorry.
Oh shit, sorry. Oh shit.
Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh
Yeah,
shit. Yeah.
Well, thank you. We can rate this episode PG-13 officially. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Daphany, we have some last few questions for you, if that's okay. It's stuff we ask everybody.
Real quick.
It's a lightning round, sort of.
And she's definitely never got to this part, so it's
no
she has
way.
no idea what's coming.
I didn't know.
Daphany.
I'm just because I feel like I definitely should have finished it because now I'm like, oh crap.
No, stop.
Oh yeah, you thought the first one was bad? Just wait. No, Daphany, when was the first time in your life, and you can answer these in lightning style if you're more comfortable, when was the first time in your life when you realized you had the power of change or the power to do something meaningful?
I want to say when I think it was right after Sandy. So I was like 16. I realized that everything I learned didn't matter. And it was just what mattered was to like help my community connect to my family, right? Help my family and the people that lived around us connect to engineers and connect to social services. And it was kind of like a guilt of being like, crap, I learned about sustainability and yet I couldn't even help myself with it. So I think it was that moment that I really started like not giving a fuck and really focused on like community and energy and resiliency all at once.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, if that doesn't get you going.
Yeah. If near-death light doesn't get me going, I don't know what will.
If your windows not getting bashed in. Well,
I know. And it was really helpful though, because it was like, up until that time, I was still like believing the stereotypes, right? Like you should be embarrassed of where you come from, where you live, who you are. You should always be grateful. And I think it was at that moment that I was like, oh, fuck all of this. Like, I'm going to just do this and get it done. And I don't really care what people say.
There's something about rock bottom that just makes you go like, I don't fucking care anymore.
Exactly.
Well, we're thankful you are who you are, but obviously, sorry you had to go through that to get there.
But don't apologize. You didn't send Sandy my way.
Wait, did you?
But did I?
I said you didn't.
I mean, all right.
Easy. Not this show. Daphny, who is someone in your life that's positively impacted your work in the past 6 months?
Who is someone in my life that's impacted my work in past 6 months? My parents. The way they've fought for me and for my community all my life has always impacted what I do.
That.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Easy.
Right.
That's their one flaw. Even though they won't tell you what your real name is. They seem great otherwise.
Yeah, they don't ever tell me what my name is.
What's your self-care these days? What do you do when you feel overwhelmed and you gotta just have some Daphny time?
Oh, 2 things. Halloween planning all year long. I love Halloween. Yeah. And then I have this guilty thing of like, I always eat sweets and then I like do Spartan races.
Wow. Incredible.
So I feel like trash.
Stop.
Yeah.
Wait, you're
you
me.
Have found your twin.
Yeah.
That's me.
Oh,
I literally
awesome.
eat, my diet is basically like 90% salad greens and 10% chocolate chip cookies. And then I just go run Spartan races to make myself feel better about it.
Yep. That's although the opposite. I'm like 90% chocolate chip cookies and 10% green.
To be clear, like I'm lying.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I've been able to
Let's just get it all out there.
I don't do any like workout. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to sign up for this beast and spend 6 hours in West Virginia trying to get home before the sun goes down because I'm like, I am not the right color to be out here in the middle of the mountain.
No. Listen, 2 questions. One, do you think Spartan races are ever going to happen again? And 2, we have to do one together now. You know that, right?
I'm totally down. I just have to warn you though. So I do one with my friend and she's like 5'11". So like she's a giant and I'm a short. So what we do is she's actually a really good runner. So she motivates me to run, but I am pretty good at lifting her over the walls. So I can lift you
Nice.
over the walls, but you have to wait for me to run.
1,000%. I mean, no question.
And
It's
I'm going to be
ride or
so
die.
happy watching you
I
guys
could
from
not
the
be more
sidelines.
excited
Are
about
there
this.
sidelines
How
at
many
Spartan
cookies
races? What do I do? Got it. I'm
Oh,
there.
you're going to have to wait like 6 hours.
I've been trying to get Brian to do one of these for so long.
Oh my
I
God,
like the
they're
eating
amazing.
sweets part
You
of
should
this
definitely
duo,
do
and
it.
then after that, I'm done. No Spartan races for me.
I love it.
Fine.
I've been able to do 2 trifectas. So
Congratulations. I mean, that is hard.
it is, but honestly, I'm very passionate about my work, and it's like what I eat, breathe, and sleep. So Spartan races is something that's like has nothing to do with efficiency in housing. And I'm like, okay, this is my break. Just like throwing myself across a wall and river.
Oh yeah, no. Trying not to eat shit as you're flying down like a forest full of roots, and you're on hour 5 is a great way to like just forget about your work for 1 minute.
Exactly.
Awesome. Love
All right,
that
Brian,
answer.
bring it home.
Here we go. Daphne, if you could send one book to Donald Trump, what would that book be? We have a big list of recommendations from all of our past guests. Great stuff. It's on Bookshop, and listeners can find all that stuff in our show notes.
That guy
what would you add to the list?
He doesn't even read, but
This is very very true.
Pretend
Probably.
it's like someone's reading to him.
I would say Bargaining for Brooklyn. Bargaining for Brooklyn is an amazing book that I recommend you all to read, that talks about community organizations in the 60s and 70s during white flight, like what they've done to support and like continue helping the community regardless of what was happening outside of them. So it's about my neighborhood. Again, like that's what I'm saying. Like he won't even read this because he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm mad because they sued me because I only wanted white people in my buildings." But it's a great book about Williamsburg and Bushwick and like what happened during those times. How like the community again came together and was like, nobody cares about us. That's fine. We'll care for each other. We'll create housing for ourselves. We'll have childcare for ourselves. We'll support each other with legal representation. And it's just such a beautiful history of how my community pre-gentrification was able to like fight against things that were coming to them. So
awesome.
Love that.
Yeah.
Excited to check that out.
Yeah.
Daphne, where can our listeners follow you on the internet?
So you can follow me. I think LinkedIn is my first, Instagram is my second, and Twitter is my third. Although Twitter and Instagram are constantly like twisting and turning on that rank level. So Daphany Rose Sanchez, Kinetic Communities Consulting on LinkedIn. And then for Instagram, I'm literally looking at it because I'm not really good at it. DAF NYC and Kinetic Communities. And for Twitter, it's also DAF NYC. I'm like a bad millennial. I'm not good at social media. I just opened all of these things like last year.
All good.
Follow me on or tweet me at DAF_NYC_. There you go. See, I'm learning the jargon.
Those are good. Those are important. I need those. Thank you. Underscores. Thank you. Awesome.
Perfect. Awesome. This has been informative and so helpful and encouraging and delightful as well. And can't thank you enough for all the work you're doing for your community and to pave the way for other communities like yours, because there are so many in so many different places that are all obviously very unique, but are unified in the fact that people that look like us for hundreds of years have been screwing you over. So whatever we can do to help, we want to do that. So thank you again for your time and for sharing your pancakes with us. If you didn't. And yeah, we hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. And I will definitely hold you accountable to that race whenever they happen, because they're probably not.
I'm so excited about this.
I have like 3 waivers because they got canceled this year. So
this is fantastic. Awesome. All right, Daphne, we will talk to you soon. Say hi to your mom and dad.
Thank
for
you
us.
so
Will
much.
do.
Have a great one.
All right, take care.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. Thanks to our incredible guest today, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. We hope this episode has made your commute or awesome workout or dishwashing or fucking dog walking late at night that much more pleasant. As a reminder, please subscribe to our free email newsletter at importantnotimportant.com. It is all the news most vital to our survival as a species.
And you can follow us all over the internet. You can find us on Twitter at importantnotimp.
Just
so weird. Also on Facebook and Instagram at Important Not Important. Pinterest and Tumblr, the same thing. So check us out, follow us, share us, like us. You know the deal. And please subscribe to our show wherever you listen to things like this. And if you're really fucking awesome, rate us on Apple Podcasts. Keep the lights on. Thanks.
please.
And you can find the show notes from today right in your little podcast player and at our website, importantnotimportant.com.
Thanks to the very awesome Tim Blaine for our jammin' music, to all of you for listening, and finally, most importantly, to our moms for making us. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.